All right, welcome everybody. This is 1.1, decimals and rounding. So what is a decimal? Well, a decimal is just part of a whole. It can be written as a fraction, or it can be written as a decimal just like this. And we'll learn how to switch back and forth by using our calculators. But until then, we need to make sure that we can remember how to round. So we can round decimals to certain accuracies based off of what's being asked. So if we're being asked to round to the tens place, well, we need to figure out where the tens place is. Or if I ask you to round to the tenths place, make sure where that is. So I feel like it's always kind of a little difficult when we're using like almost the same words, but like when we talk about tens versus tenths. Okay, what's the difference? Okay, well, when we're talking about tenths, really what we're saying is this is like 1 out of 10. This is 1/10. Okay, or like if we're talking about thousandths, this is like saying we have 7 hundredths. Okay, or if we had another, that would be out of 1,000. So I guess here that would be like a 0 thousandths. Okay, so do your best to remember the place values. Take a minute to look at those and remember where the tenths place, hundredths place, thousandths place are. Okay, this is what we're going to be talking about the majority of the time is using decimals. Okay, all right, so let's just go into a problem. So it says round the value up above, which is actually below, so ignore what I wrote, in the tenths place. Well, how do we do that? And where's the tenths place? So one thing you may think, well, here is that's like our tens place, so maybe that's where it is, okay? But make sure if it has a th, it's going to be a decimal. So the tenths place is right here. That's like 1 out of 10. That's 1/10. Okay, and they want us to round. So either we're going to round up or we're going to round down. So here's kind of like how we can remember this is we're going to round up if the number to the right of the place value is 5 or greater. Okay, so if it's 5, if we look to the right and it's a 5, we round up. If it's a 6, we round up. If it's a 7, we round up. Okay. We're going to round down if the number to the right of the place value is less than 5. Okay, so looking at this example, we have our tenths place, which is the 1. We look to the right, and it's a 7. 7 is greater than 5, so we are going to round up to 2. So we'd have 4829.2. Okay. If we kind of look at this, is 17 going to be closer to 20 or is it going to be closer to 10? And it's closer to 20, so that's another way to kind of think about it. Let's do another example when we'll need to round down. So something like 9.44. Okay, still we're going to round the number to the tenths place. So here's our tenths place. We look to the right. It's less than 5, so our answer here would be rounded to 9.4. All right. One more example, maybe if we have something like 6.45. Okay. Again, we look to the right. It's 5. So remember, if it's 5 or greater, we're going to round up. So we're going to round that up to 65 or 6.5. Okay. All right. Please follow along with the notes. I'll turn those in on when we do our test. I'll collect all your notes and I will give you points for following what we do in class. All right, pause and see if you can do example 1. So here it asks us to round this number to the tenths place. So the tenths place, again, is the first value after the decimal. We look to the right, it's a 9, which is greater than 5, so we're going to round up to 3225.5. Okay, whole number, this is our whole number, this 5. Maybe I'll just erase this real quick. Okay, This is our ones place. We look to the right. We see a 4, but 4 is less than 5, so we're going to round down to 3225. Okay? This value is closer to 3,225 than it is to 3,226 by just a bit. All right, last but not least, this is a little tricky, so make sure we look at this. They want us to round to the hundredths. So first off, we need to identify the hundredths place. So here is our hundredths place. We look to the right, and it's a 6. So that's greater than 5, so we're going to round up. But we're going to round that 9 up to a 10. Okay? So in effect, this 9 rounds up to a 10, which makes the next one over go up to 5. Okay? So if you ever round a value from 9 to a 10, that means we're going to round it over again, and we'll bump up that next value as well. So our answer here should be 3225.50. And since we're rounding to the nearest hundredths, we should keep that hundredths place available as a 0. Okay? So again, this one's a little tricky. If you round a value up and that 9 becomes a 10, that means we're going to round again up to the next value. That 4 becomes a 5. Okay? All right, here's just a couple word problems. See if you can pause and give those a try. Okay, it says a drink contains 16.35 liters of fluid, round to the nearest liter. All right, well, where is the whole liter, or the whole place? Okay, well, that would be like the ones place. So this is a whole 6 liters here. We wouldn't want to do anything less than that because those are like partial liters. So we pick our 6, we look right, it's a 3, which is less than 5, so we'll round this value down to 16. All right, and then it says Sasha's been saving money for babysitting. She saved $96.75. It says round that amount to the nearest tens place. So again, is this the same? What's the difference between the nearest 10 or the nearest tenth? What's the difference between those two? Okay, again, 10, the 10th place, or the tens place, is right here. Okay, so 2 values left of the decimal, where the tenths place is right here. So make sure you keep those organized. All right, so here we have our tens place. We look to the right. So that 6 is greater than 5, so we're going to round that 9 up to 10. Okay, and again, if that becomes a 10, the number to the left of that will round up again. So this is kind of like a 0, so that 0 is going to go up to give us a 1. Okay, so if you round up to the nearest tenth, she's closer to 100 than she is at 90. And I think that kind of is apparent just looking at that. Okay? Okay, so rounding. Again, I think this is probably the most important thing that we're covering today, is making sure that you can round. We're going to be doing that some more as we go through different units. I will ask you to round typically to like the tenths place or the hundredths place. So make sure you're good with that. All right, the rest is going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing decimals. I'm going to say this right away. I am okay if you just use your calculator. Okay, I don't want you to get all work. I don't want you to get worried about being able to do this. If you can do it by hand, great. I may give you, if it's like on a test, I could give you extra credit if you do it by hand. I know I have some things like that on the test. But for me, it's more important to me that you are all set up being able to use your calculator. and know how to work it, okay? I'm going to do an example by doing it by hand, and then, again, you can do it using your calculator. So really, if you're good using your calculator, you could probably skip what I'm covering here. Dividing for sure, I think I would suggest just using your calculator. And then make sure you're here for this part too, okay? Because this is a little tricky with like your calculator, and I'll do my best to try and make sure that works. Especially if you use one of my calculators or buy one that's similar to what I have, this will help you a lot. Anyways, so here we go. I'm going to do it by hand. So addition, we'll always line up the decimal point before adding or subtracting, okay? If a number is missing, we can always put a 0 in the place value, and then pay attention with the operations, whether we're adding or subtracting, okay? So again, we're going to line up our decimals. Okay, if we're missing a spot, we can put in a 0. We're adding, and then we just add verticals right to left. So 0 to 2, or 0 plus 2 is 2. 8 plus 4 is 12. Again, we need to carry the 1. And then we'll add all those up and we get 8. Again, what's more important to me is that you are rounding, or I guess not, I don't know, it's just very important, okay? So round to the nearest whole number. Here's our whole number. Look to the right. 2 is less than 5, so we'll round down to 8. It's closer to 8. This value is closer to 8 than it is to 9. Okay? All right, here's another example. You do the same thing if you have 3 things. So with addition, you could do 1.28, 0.27, 3.002. We could put zeros in the missing spots. Okay, this would give us 2. 15, we'll carry the 1, 5, and 4, okay? Round to the nearest hundredths. So the hundredths place is the second 5. We look to the right. 2 is less than 5, so we're going to round down. It's closer to 5 than it is, this value is closer to 5 than it is to 6. So we do 4.55. Subtraction, you do the same sort of thing. Again, I guess I'll do it again. You can kind of skip past this if you're just going to use your calculator. Okay, here we're going to need to borrow. We have some empty spots. We can put in some zeros if that helps. 0 minus 1, well, to do it this way, you really need to have, you can't take something from nothing. So we're going to need to borrow. So we can change that 3 or 4 to a 3, and we'll put that 1 over here to give us a 10. We'll borrow from there, we get a 9, and then here we'll get our 10. So 10 minus 1 is 9. 9 minus 8 is 1. 3 minus 2 is 1. 9 minus 4 is 3. And 4 minus 0 is 4, and 1 minus 0 is 1. So this would be our answer. Again, you can just use your calculator, but we want to round to the tenths place. Tenths place is right here. Just kidding. This is our tenths place. We look to the right. It's less than 5, so we'd do 14.3. All right. So again, please just use your calculator. I think maybe on your homework we have a problem where we have like maybe something like this, similar, I don't know. Oops. Something like this, okay? If you put this into your calculator, if the first thing is a negative, so this is like negative 4.5, it's not minus 4.5. So we need to make sure many of your calculators will have something like this, telling us that that's a negative instead of a minus. So we'd push a button that looks something like this first, and then we'd do 4.5, and then we'd do the subtraction button, something like that, to subtract 7.2, if that makes sense. If you have any questions on that, just let me know, and I can show you using my calculator or your calculator. Multiplying, again, I'm okay if you just use your calculator. I think it's valuable to know how to do this, and if you do it, that's great. I think it's be good practice for you. So here's the steps. First off, we need to multiply as if there were no decimals. It doesn't really matter, okay? So we can do 13 times 5, okay? Multiply. So 5 times 3 is 15, and then 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. Now we need to figure out where the decimals belong. Okay, so here what you do is you count how many decimal values are there. So for here there's 1, here there's 1. So that means we're going to start here and we're going to move the decimal twice. So 1, 2. So our answer here is going to be 0.65. Again, check it with your calculator, make sure that's right. And then we want to round to the tenths place. So again, the tenths place is right here. It's your first decimal value. Look to the right, it's a 5. If it's a 5, we also round up. So 5 and above, we round up. So 65 is closer to 7, or 6 is closer to 6.65 is closer to 7 than it is to 6. And really it's kind of right in the middle, but just for convention, we will always round up if we look to the right and it's a 5. And I just did exactly what I just said, opposite what I said. So we got 0.7. All right, check it with your calculators for all your homeworks, please. Let's do one more over here, okay? So again, we don't need the decimals, so 122, and we're going to multiply it by 27. We'll figure out the decimals later. So 7 times 2 is 14, we'll carry the 1. 7 times 2 is 14, we'll add the 1 to give us 15. And then 7 times 1 is 7, plus 1 is 8. And then we'll do our 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. And 2 times 1 is 2. We'll add everything up. So 4, 9, 12, carry the 1, and 3. And then we just need to figure out our decimal. So again, we have 2 decimal values here and 1 here. So that gives us a total of 3. So we'll start here and go 1, 2, 3. So 3.294. And then again, it's a great idea to double check. So 1.22 times 2.7. And I got it, sweet. And then we're going to round to the whole number, nearest whole number. So we look to the right, 2 is less than 5, so we're going to round down to 3. So 3.294 is closer to 3 than it is to 4. Okay, dividing. So here, if you need to divide, you need to do some long division, okay? But again, you can just use your calculator. I'll show you how to do it if you want to. I think it's kind of fun to practice. But what you're going to need to do first is we need to take, the instructions, I always have them here for you to look at too. We need to move the decimal point of the divisor to the right until it's a whole number. So our divisor is what we want to see how many times it goes into. So this is our divisor, and this is our dividend. So I'll put those there. Okay. So it says we need to move the decimal until it's no longer until it's a whole number. So we'd need to move it twice. So that would give us 3. And if we do that, we need to also do it with the dividend. So we'll move that over twice. So we need to put in a 0 in there. So we end up really, this is the same thing. 4.5 divided by 0.03 is the same as 450 divided by 3. And then it's just a little more easier. It's just easier to work with. We can set it up as, doing long division. And we can solve it that way. So how many times does 3 go into 4? Well, it goes in 1 time. And then we multiply 1 times 3 to give us this value. And we'll subtract. It gives us 1. We'll bring the 5 down. So how many times does 3 go into 15? Goes in 5 times. So 3 times 5 is 15. And we get 0. We bring down that last value, which is 0. How many times does 3 go into 0? It goes in 0 times. And then we could subtract 0, and we end up getting 0. So again, our decimals, like right here, we moved it over twice, remember? So our answer here is just 150. You could check it with your calculator. You should end up getting 150 as well. If you're using your calculator, you don't need to move the decimals or anything. You can just plug it in just how it is. All right? If you'd like to practice B, use your calculator. You just type it in 1.8 and divide it by 0.8. And you'll get that's another thing, okay? So for my calculators or one that's similar like mine, it will write your answer as a fraction, but we're asking for decimals. And typically your calculator, at least if you have one that's like mine, it will have a little button, at least mine it's right above the delete button. It has like an S with like an arrow to a D. So it's basically saying you can take it from a standard form, what it gives you, and it will switch it into a decimal. So here, my calculator here tells me it's 9/4, but I want to write it as a decimal, so I'll push that button, and it will give me 2.25. Okay. Your calculator may already give it as a decimal, and if that's the case, then great. Okay, it says round to the 10th place, so here's the 10th place. We look to the right, it's a 5, so do we round up to 3 or do we round down to 2? So since 5, if it's 5, we round up. 5 or greater, we round up, so 2.3. All right, changing decimals to fractions. Again, I'm okay if you just use your calculator for this as well. I will show you how to do it otherwise if you want to do it by hand, but it's okay if you want to use your calculator. So first off, let's do it the harder way, or doing it by hand. So the instructions are here, but I'll just kind of explain it to you. If you have a decimal like 0.1 and we want to write it as a fraction, we need to look and see what is the furthest left is your place value. So for this, the place value is the 10th place. Here, it's the 100th place. This is the 1000th place. This is the 100th place. Okay, so we look and see what the furthest place value it is. So for the first one, it's a tenth. So to write it as a fraction is we'll just take the decimal part, the 1, and we will divide it by its place value, which here is the 10th place. So we'll put a 10. For the next example, we have a 100th place. So we'll take that 0.3, and we'll just take those decimal values, 23, and we'll divide it by its place value, which here is the 100th place. So we'll divide it by 100. Here we have our tenths, hundredths, thousandths, so we'll take that 464 and we'll divide it by 1,000. All right, and then here for the last one, if we have a whole number, we'll just write it out in the front, and then we will write the decimal as a fraction. So this is a 100th place, so we'll do 25 out of 100. All right, and then it says, if needed, simplify your fraction. So this is another great reason to just use your calculator because it oftentimes will reduce it for you. So these two are already reduced. These are not. The last two are not reduced. So what we need to do is, to do it by hand, is you just want to start thinking of things that you can divide both the top and the bottom, the numerator and denominator, by. Okay? So you can just kind of check and guess. If the last two numbers are evens, you can always divide by evens. Okay, so you could start dividing everything by 2s. So that is, sometimes I'll write it like this. I don't know if that's how you do it. We divide top and bottom by 2. So we get 6, and here you end up put it in your calculator anyways, so if you're going to be doing that, you can just put it into your calculator. right? Maybe we should just do that. Let's just do that, okay? So if you want to write this as a fraction, just type in this into your calculator, 0.464, and do equal, and it will reduce it for you. So I'm just going to erase these. And this is what my calculator ends up getting me. Some calculators will have it as a decimal and you have to do something to turn it into a fraction. Please just come and talk to me because it depends on what calculator you're using. Okay. Here we can reduce this. You can just type in 1.25, push equal. For me, it reduces it as an improper fraction, and that's what I would prefer. Okay, this is called a mixed fraction, and this is an improper fraction. So they're equal to each other. It's just different ways to write it. So when we come up to our next two lessons, I'm going to require you to write all your answers as improper fractions. Okay? All right, so just use your calculator for those. And then switching from fraction to a decimal, this is nice and easy if you want to use your calculator, is all you need to do is plug this into your calculator. 1 divided by 10, or 23 divided by 100, or 58 divided by 125. Okay? If you do that, it will write your answer. So why don't we do this one together? So 58, type it in your calculator, divided by 125. So my calculator will always write it as a fraction. It writes the same thing. To change it from a fraction to a decimal, we use that same button. Where was that? Right here. I talked about the S to D. That's how my calculator switches. And if yours is different, yours probably will already have it as a decimal. And that's what you end up getting, 0.494. Okay? If you want to do a mixed fraction, oftentimes calculators have mixed fraction buttons. Again, if you were to use your calculator, you have different options, and when you're in class, I will help you out with this, but you can put this in your calculator as 1 plus 1 divided by 4. That's the same thing. Or if you have a mixed fraction button, then oftentimes you can just plug it in just how it looks. But again, come talk to me and I'll help you make sure you get it. But you should end up getting 1.25. All right, so that's it. Please make sure you get this done for your homework on time. If you have questions, you're welcome to come and stop before or after school. Again, make sure you can do this with your calculator. If you want to try and do it by hand, again, I would recommend that you go and use your calculator anyways to check your work. I also provide the odd answers on the back. Okay. Caveat with that, please be careful with that. I expect you to, if I ask you to show work, if work is available, I expect it to be there. I will be grading your evens, so I will give you the odds. We'll grade the evens, or at least 5 of the evens from your homework. And I will also give you points, or for your grade is completion. So I'm asking you to do all of the problems on the homework. Let's look at the homework really quick. Actually, I already have that open. So the front page, I'm going to ask you to round to the certain values that they ask you to do. So make sure you may need to look at your notes for that. For these, please just use your calculator. Some of them are a little tricky, that like something like this, taking a positive and subtracting something that's even more negative. Doing that by hand is kind of tricky. That's one of the reasons why I decided just to let you guys use your calculators for this. If you want to know how to do that, let me know. And then multiplying decimals, again here, ask you to round to the tenths. Here I ask you to round to the hundredths. Okay, so please do those because that will be part of your grade. These word problems, they're basically saying, well, just read them. It kind of gives you the equation, what you need to do. If you have questions on those, stop by. And then switching between from a fraction to a decimal and decimal to a fraction, we kind of talked about that also. So just make sure you got that. And like I said, the last page is your odd answers. So check those. They should be correct. I think there was one mistake here. I think it's like 193 or something like that. So just keep in mind. Sometimes I change things from last year and I forget sometimes to update the answers. So, all right. Thank you, and I will see you later.